It's on? Okay. Good morning. I know you all want to get to work, so let's get started. And we'll try to get out of here by 9:30 this morning. Hi, I'm Ellen Meyer. I'm Executive Director of the Civic League for Regional Atlanta, and I'm so happy to see you all. Welcome to our third Movers, Shakers, and Policymakers Forum. This is a program where we bring together big ideas and big thinkers for the purpose of moving Metro Atlanta forward. You all obviously are the big thinkers, and today's big idea is creative placemaking. This is a new topic for the Civic League, but one that makes a lot of sense for us because it's about leveraging the power and the magic of arts and culture to create communities where people and businesses want to be. The Civic League, similarly, is engaging the people of Metro Atlanta in creating places where people and businesses want to be, whether it's through transportation, sustainability, education, and now arts and culture. The Civic League is to citizens what the Chamber of Commerce is to businesses and the Atlanta Regional Commission is to local governments. We educate, we engage, we empower the people of Metro Atlanta so that they can have a true voice in the plans, policies, and issues shaping their communities and the region. And conversations like this are where that sort of change begins. As we get started, I'd like to thank our speaker, Carol Coletta, our panelists, Mayor Nancy Harris, Barbara Griffin, Sharice Williams, Dave Peterson, and our moderator, Otis White. Thanks also to our planning committee who took a messy idea and turned it into a cohesive and I think interesting program for this morning. Gregory Burbidge, Kane Williamson, Shelley Lamar, David Vogt, Christina Christie, and Ray Varney. Finally, and most of all, thanks to our friends at Wells Fargo for making this event possible and for their strong support of arts and culture across Metro Atlanta. We are also grateful to Jacobs, the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, and Turner Broadcasting System. Now, please welcome Mara Holly with Wells Fargo. She's Senior Vice President and Regional Director of Government and Institutional Banking for Wells Fargo.
Thank you, Ellen. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I have the distinct honor of introducing what I know will be a speaker who will engage, delight, and spark lots of great ideas and thoughts in each of you. Carol Coletta is a nationally recognized expert on cities and leveraging arts and culture to build communities. When we first enticed Carol to join us for today's discussion, she was the founding director of Art Place, a unique collaboration between 13 private foundations, the National Endowment of the Arts, and several financial institutions. This group was organized to promote creative placemaking. Arts Place has awarded more than $26 million to fund creative placemaking projects and initiatives in 46 communities across the country. But today is officially Carol's second day or the start of her second week, it sort of changes, in her new job. In March, she was named Vice President of Community and National Initiatives for the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, where she will direct the foundation's work to identify and support innovative ideas and projects that help people and communities shape their futures. Through these programs, the Knight Foundation experiments with new approaches to community engagement, including using technology to connect communities for action, building attachment through the arts, engaging community foundations nationwide in addressing community information needs. Carol has also served as president and CEO of CEOs for Cities, a national network of urban leaders building and sustaining the next generation of great American cities. She also has a direct, perhaps little-known connection to Atlanta. She was a researcher and co-author of a study commissioned by the Metro Atlanta Chamber several years ago entitled The Young and Restless, and no, it's not a soap opera, it's How Atlanta Competes for Talent. As I read up on Carol on the internet, the concepts of collaboration, great cities, arts and culture as a driver for economic development, creative placemaking, and vibrant communities kept popping up. Carol understands that arts and culture are truly the heart of our communities, please join me in welcoming Carol back to Atlanta.
Thank you so much. Last Friday night, I was at the gala of the Arsh Performing Arts Center, and I found myself sitting next to a business leader in Miami. He's a banker, and he's on the Beacon Council, which is their premier economic development organization. And they've lost their exec. I think he's retiring, and they said they're in a search for a new one. So he had been named head of the search committee, and I said, well, what qualities are you looking for in a new director? He said, well, there are three things we really want him to be, him or her, I hope, to be really skilled at. He said, first, the council needs someone who understands the fundamentals of economic development. He said, next, we need someone who understands urbanism, because Miami is very sprawling, and it's losing business productivity in that sense, and it's becoming harder to attract people to a place where there hasn't been a focus on placemaking. The third thing, he said, that this candidate needs to understand is the value of art and culture. Because, he told me, that's the way we've rebranded Miami as a sophisticated international brand. And in reflecting on that afterwards, I thought, you know, he may just have described the perfect 21st century candidate for an economic development leadership job. And I can't imagine that anyone in Miami imagined that as the top three qualities that they would be seeking even 10 years ago. Most certainly, arts have economic impact. We all know about that. When people go to something like the Woodruff Center, they spend money on food, they spend money on transportation, sitting, so that, you know, they do spend money in other parts of the economy. The arts employ people, we all know that. We also know that arts underpin creative businesses today, and there's some of the fastest growing businesses in the country, businesses like fashion and food and film and digital and so forth. Mara said it, a city needs a strong cultural scene because it makes a city more vibrant. We've spent a lot of time at Art Place looking at vibrancy, because that's what attracts young people who, I could get into this and we could spend all morning talking about it, but young college-educated people are the most mobile people in our society. So if you need to attract more talent, you have to get it while it's young. If you need to keep talent, that's when you're vulnerable to losing talent, when it's young. And we know that 66% of college-educated 25 to 34-year-olds say first they look for the city they want to live in, then they look for a job. And then art, when manifested as creative placemaking, can lead to not only more vibrancy, which we've looked at, but we've also looked at diversity, more economic integration. We're looking at diversity on two spectrums, one racial and ethnic diversity, and the other is economic diversity, both of which make for stronger economies, and they make for stronger people. And again, we could talk a long time about that. Art is certainly a means of building a community's brand. That's the Art Basel story in Miami. It not only provides a positive narrative for the city, and especially when the city needed one, but it can also improve the reputation of a city in ways that also improve the reputation of the people who work there. The people who work in certain places have more value because of where they do business. Is it real value? Is it perceived value? It doesn't matter if you can monetize it. But, you know, I've been thinking, Otis and I were talking about this earlier, perhaps the most valuable contribution art makes to a city is as a way to lodge innovation not only into our practice of development, community building, and infrastructure, which is really important. And I know we're going to talk about that on the panel, but also the need to model innovation into all parts of everyday life. And Joe, this is where we were talking earlier. There would, how many of you are artists? Oh, okay. Thank you, artist. I appreciate you coming out. But okay, so with apologies to you, art is one of the cheapest ways to challenge us with ideas and images we haven't encountered before, thus helping us see things differently, which is sort of the first step to innovation. You don't have innovation without creativity. And I was struck, a few weeks ago, Tom Friedman was writing his New York Times column, and he wrote, "Increasingly, there is no such thing as a high-wage, middle-skilled job, the thing that sustained the middle class in the last generation. Now there's only a high-wage, high-skilled job. Every middle-class job today is being pulled up, down, or out faster than ever. That is, it either requires more skill or can be done by more people around the world, or can be done by more people around the world, or it's being buried, made obsolete faster than ever." Which is why the goal of great cities today should not be necessarily to make every child college ready. We need to do that. But really to make every child innovation ready. And it's really hard for me to imagine how you do that without art. How you do that without creative places. How you do that without making places that every day challenge people again to think differently, which I think is one of those things that you can't necessarily put a monetary value on it, but we all know it's valuable. In fact, it's not just valuable, it's absolutely essential to a 21st century U.S. innovation economy. So it sort of strikes me that we're spending a lot of time arguing about something when we just really ought to get on with it. But that's another story. But if you believe Friedman's point about being innovation ready, then what we have to know is this is not about the talented 10th. This is not about the 10%. This is about the 90%. Because I know, we can't have a society where 10% of us succeed and 90% of us are falling behind, right? Democracy can't be sustained in that way. So again, we need to start thinking, how do we make everyone innovation ready? How do we make everyone creative? How do we allow everyone to express that creativity? And I really believe it begins with education, but continues powerfully through place. And so I just want to make this point without notes, because I think it's really important, and we're not there yet. So creative placemaking that we're going to talk about today really does have this value of making places more enjoyable, more livable. I love what you said about using the magic of art and culture to make places where business and residents want to be. Love that. Exactly what it is. But I think there's something more. I think there's this added piece that we haven't yet found a way, Joe, to talk about. And I think that's what you're trying to get to. We need to hear from you before this is over. So I think art is really fundamental to where we're going economically and where we're going with places, and both of those are important. So for these reasons and more, we did 13 foundations, 6 banks, and a number of federal agencies did come together about 2 years ago to form Art Place, which is a marvelous collaboration of interest who all saw the value of, who all saw exactly what you said, the magic that art and culture can bring to places to make them the kinds of places we all want to be. Our goal at Art Place was to convince people who are making places routinely, developers, mayors, transportation officials, parks directors, all of those people, that art could add unique value, could add value in a way that only art can to their agendas, right? To driving their agendas of making places that are valuable, places that last, places that are sustainable, places that people want to be. So the definition we use for creative placemaking at Art Place, although maybe I like yours better, is that we invest in art at the heart of a portfolio of strategies to transform communities. We use a place lens for that work, and I think this is really important because we struggled with this for 2.5 years during the startup, but essentially, if you invest in people, and those people become more prosperous, those people have more options. When they have more options, they are more likely to move. If you instead invest in place, as people become more prosperous, they stick to place. And I think this is something that again, we don't recognize in ways we should, just as we don't really understand the value today of economic integration, which we're moving away from, rather than moving toward. So we are using a place lens on our work. And, you know, if anybody needs evidence of it, I mean, if they've lived as long as I have, you know, you saw it in Atlanta, I saw it in Memphis, we know what happened in the 60s when people who had been consigned to a particular part of town then had the ability by policy and by increasing economic wealth could move elsewhere. They did, and it left the people left behind more isolated than ever. Not a good thing. So our theory of change is pretty simple. An art place is characterized by diversity and vibrancy. Vibrancy and diversity are essential to quality of place. Quality of place is essential to the attraction and retention of talent and the ability of people to thrive in place. And human capital is essential to the economic success of places. I think it's an exciting evolution in the field. So just imagine for a minute the Atlanta Metro, if you could put an artist on every corner, if you could make every corner vibrant. Now, you know, I think that would be, you know, like, who wouldn't want to live in that world, right? I mean, I don't know, maybe some terrible curmudgeon, but I think that would be a pretty special place to live. At Art Place, we've resisted characterizing creative placemaking and putting it into buckets. Ellen and I were talking earlier about you know, part of the problem when you keep things in silos, you keep the assets locked up, right? So you never understand where those intersections can create new energy. And that's exactly what we've tried to do at Art Place, is understand where those intersections can be. We use 11 creative placemaking principles that include such guidelines as a creative placemaking leverages the creative potential already present in a place. It creates opportunities for people to thrive in a place. It supports economic diversity. It creates distinctive places. We don't like the cookie cutter approach. It contributes to a mix of uses and people, fosters connections, presents itself to the public and encourages pedestrian activity, creates a place where business and people want to be, and convinces people, and I think this is important, that a place can have a different and better future. I had a great conversation several months ago with Cory Booker, the mayor of Newark. We were both waiting to be introduced on a program, and the introductions were going on and on. So I finally slipped him a question, and I said, what remains your greatest challenge as mayor? And he looked at it, and he laughed, and then he took a big sigh, and he leaned over to me, and he said, getting people to believe that things can be different. I thought about that, and I thought, you know, that is such a powerful idea. And I can't think of anything that works better than art to make people believe that signals things can be better here. Things are getting better here. And that's, we've seen that examples of that all over the country. Let me tell you, at Art Place, we're measuring our work on as I say, these two outcomes, vibrancy and diversity. We've built a set of open source metrics. I won't talk about them now. We can talk about them if you want to know more. There's more on our website at artplaceamerica.org, but they're open source. They're everywhere. You can use them for your own work in your own communities. I I want to just give you one super quick example because I want to get the panel up and I want you to be able to ask your questions. But just an example of what Art Place is funding. And let me talk about, just briefly, the internationally renowned artist named Theaster Gates. He works on the south side of Chicago. It's actually one of the smallest grants we've made to date. And it's probably one of the most difficult to recognize immediately as art or as creative placemaking. We funded the renovation of a home in a very depressed neighborhood on Chicago's south side. It was the third of about 4 homes that his organization, Rebuild, now owns in that block. And when it came to us, it was billed as the Black Cinema House. We want you to fund the Black Cinema House. But we funded it, and as it as it was being built in Theaster's mind, it morphed into something entirely different. It became a performance space, a catering kitchen, Theaster's home, a place for artists in residence. But what was critical is not that it was a place for black film. What was critical, that was never the point. The point was that film would create a reason for people in the neighborhood and from outside the neighborhood to come together, back to connections, right? Back to sort of working at the intersections. So Theaster just created a reason for people to come together, food and music rather than film. He's creating a place, a community that he wants to be a part of, and a place he wants to live, and which accounts then for these hybrid amenities he's creating in the neighborhood, the attention to craft, the curated guest lists for events, and as people come to the neighborhood, come to the house, they take part in the events, they then sort of catch fire and they want to be part of the neighborhood. They want to be part of the investing. So it's interesting because we were talking earlier, Joe, about it's not about decorating the neighborhood, right? It's about creating these places for people to connect and then to do what they do, right? To celebrate being human, to make art, which is it's not as obvious, right? It's not the easiest thing to categorize, but it's the texture, it's creating texture and richness and diversity in our communities that makes it so exciting. So let me just wrap up and tell you quickly just a few things that we've learned so far. First, we've learned that the best creative placemaking is organic. I feel very certain about that. It's not a top-down thing. It's sort of looking and seeing what's bubbling at the bottom and then sort of, fanning that flame and letting it catch fire. We don't have a formula for successful creative placemaking. I think the best we'll ever do is coming up with that set of principles. But for creative placemaking to succeed, this is important, it must be from the place and of the place. I was in Phoenix recently meeting with the mayor and the new director of an expanded bid there where they have all the big stadia. And in Phoenix, they will tell you it's been easier to do a $50 million deal than a $50,000 deal. But the guys, and they're mostly guys, running the big deals are now getting it that they need small wonders too. So they got the big deals. They know how to do the big deals in Phoenix. They don't know how to do the small wonders. And they're realizing that's what's missing to really, make the community click, which is really exciting. And that's what makes the place interesting to people. It makes discovery possible. It gets people walking. And the small wonders are almost always organic. And then just to acknowledge the obvious, going organic is the only way that you ever make art scale or make creative placemaking scale, make it general. As James Joyce would say, you can't do it top down, and you can't do it without artists at the table from the very beginning. So creative placemaking is not about figuring out, okay, we're going to do this transportation corridor, and then at the end we'll bring the artist in and they can do the public art. Really, you can do that, that's nice, but it kind of misses having the artist at the table, which may lead you to a different solution entirely. And that's part of the excitement. So bringing them in early, is important, and I think that's where a lot of strategies go wrong. Second thing we've learned, it's the creative milieu that counts. It's not just about nonprofit arts. I think it's about a broader set of questions. It's about for-profit and not-for-profit. Back to your intersections. For-profit, not-for-profit, art and food. It's artists and transportation planners. It's again working at that intersection that's so exciting. And if you want to see some of the work we've done on this, go to our website again. Look for the top art places in America, and you'll see some of those narratives that capture some of this. Again, I think it's that overlap that makes it really interesting. And then finally, I think we can say with great confidence that creative placemaking works. We don't have all the metrics in yet, but we can see forward progress, which is what we want to see. We know that the investments that we've made to date, $26.9 million, has leveraged $180 million and attracted another $109 million of additional investment to those neighborhoods where we invested. We also know that the early signals of momentum indicate great progress. More than 60% of our grantees report that since our investment, there are fewer vacancies in the neighborhood, and more than 85% of grantees say community members believe the neighborhood is improving. So I think those are strong indications that the organizations Art Places funding are having a positive effect on their immediate communities. So when you make artists part of the DNA of a place, you will inevitably make that place more vibrant, more appealing. I don't think any of us can really argue with that. But if, by making artists part of a city's DNA, we make the city a place where citizens can imagine new possibilities and solve problems creatively, that's when a city soars. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carol. I've known Carol for a long time. In fact, met Carol when she had a radio program on NPR, which was just wonderful, called Smart City. And Carol and I had and she allowed me to come on as a guest every once in a while and just pontificate about things. And I remember we had a conversation about Detroit. Now, this is 10 years or so ago, and I was the pessimist. I just said, I understand Detroit's potential, but I can't see how it's going to get started. And I think we now have and Carol was the optimist. She said, somehow Detroit will come back. And I've been following Detroit ever since then. And it's interesting to see how it begins in Detroit. And it begins with the artists coming to Midtown in Detroit. And across this largely written off city, there are little pockets of arts which are beginning to revive this wonderful city and its wonderful architecture. So Carol was always right, being the optimist she is. She was always right, and I'm excited to see her again. We're going to get Carol back up here on this stage in a few minutes to help us have a conversation with you. You're going to have a big role in this event today, so stick around. It's going to be fun. But it's our job, it's the job of this panel here to begin to connect some of the things that Carol has talked about with what's going on in the Atlanta area, or what ought to be going on in the Atlanta area. So let me introduce the people who are going to help us make these connections. I'll begin on the end here with Barbara Griffin. Barbara is the Senior Vice President of Image Management at Turner Broadcasting, but she really wants me to say that she's much more than that. Mm-hmm. She is a talented photographer in her own right. She is on the board of Atlanta Celebrates Photography. She is a member of the High Museum's Friends of Photography group, And she's one of the steering committee members for TEDx Atlanta, which I think means that you have someplace to be later today. Is that right?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So Barbara Griffin. Next to Barbara is Sharice Williams, who is the president of Young Audiences, which is the arts education program for our hosts, the Woodruff Center. Now, you would think Sharice comes from an acting or music background, and I understand there is some talent there. There is some acting and musical talent. But in fact, she is an attorney and has spent years working with young people in education, so she brings a little bit of an outsider's eye as well as an insider's eye to our discussion today. So Sharice Williams. And next to Sharice is Dave Peterson, who also brings a little different perspective to this conversation. Dave is the founder and former CEO of the North Highland Company, which is a global business consulting firm. And his interest in the arts comes from his seeing the connection between arts and culture, quality of life, and economic development, some of the things that Carol's talked about. And he believes very strongly that we need to support the arts with money. So Dave, welcome. You'll be a welcome voice in this crowd, I think. And finally, let me introduce Mayor Nancy Harris of Duluth. Now, Mayor Harris has been mayor of Duluth since 2008, and before that, she was a school principal. She is a strong advocate for the arts in her community, which I'm going to try to draw her out a little bit on, see if she'll talk a little bit about Duluth and what's going on there. But one note, if you like elected officials with a sense of humor, I'm thinking Mayor Harris may be your cup of tea, because it turns out that not only is she the mayor of Duluth, but she has somehow engineered it so that her dog, Shiner, is the mayor of the Duluth Dog Park. Now, I'm not sure how that vote was held, but I'm fairly sure none of the voters had to show photo IDs as part of that voting process. And finally, I'm Otis White, president of Civic Strategies, and we do strategic planning work with local governments and civic organizations, including a fair amount with the Civic League over the years. So, once more, we're going to start a conversation up here about how Atlanta is doing in the arts, or could be doing, and then we'll go to the audience, to you all, for your questions, and we'll have people with mics who will be in the aisles, and then we'll get Carol back up to help with that. So let me start by asking the panel, what did you hear from Carol's talk that resonated with you? And just anybody jump in and offer up some thoughts. This is not a shy group, so let's not be shy.
I'll begin. For me, I like Carol talking about how it needs to be an organic process. It needs to come from and be of the place. And I really think that grassroots initiatives do make things catch on and last. So that stuck out for me.
I'm going to piggyback on that. I really like the concept of the organic growth, because it really is hard to plan. Someone says that creativity and innovation takes a lot of practice and planning, but it is easier when it is an organic process. That's where you get the gels going. And I think as we think about the economic portfolio of a community, you can have the big bets, but a lot of small bets pay off later too.
I was struck by Carol's comment that our education needs to be focused on making kids innovation ready. That really resonated with me, especially given that our public education system, of all the sectors of our kind of economy and society, is often the slowest to innovate. And that's a challenge for us in lots of ways. And then I would also say, though, continuing to believe that things can be better and different is really important for those of us who are trying to advocate for a different kind of education for our children. So thank you for that, Carol.
I like the idea of building on what we already have. There's a huge amount of energy right now in Atlanta around the arts with groups like Flux and ACP and Wonder Root. And how do we help those groups sustain and grow and develop into something bigger than they are today? You know, the idea also about innovation being something and creativity being something that's a daily part of our thinking, that it's something that we need to focus on every single day.
All right. Well, this is the Civic League, and the Civic League is a kind of organization that likes to think deep and it likes to think long. So let me ask a deep and long question here. If we were to commit ourselves to developing the arts here in Atlanta, if we were to do the things that Carol has been counseling us to do today, How would things be different in 20 years? What would we see? How would the Atlanta area work in a different way in 20 years than it works now? What's the upside? Anyone jump in?
Well, selfishly, I would wish that Atlanta in 20 years would be a major center for photography and visual storytelling. I think there's a huge opportunity for us. The South is so known for amazing storytelling, but to actually be visual storytellers, to represent the diversity of our area, that empower kids to really have a great sense of community and identity, and get people out in the community sharing their stories. I think that's a huge opportunity for us, and for Atlanta to be a place where, maybe Atlanta has the South by Southwest version of a photo festival, or the Sundance version of a film festival, or, something that really draws people to the city. It makes this a cultural destination just as much as any sporting event.
So Atlanta could be a destination.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the arts, as well as a place that generates it for its own population. People could come here for the arts.
Yes, people would see this as someplace that was vital, where the arts are important, and arts are entertaining. It's just as entertaining as anything else.
All right. Anybody else? Vision?
I would say, to the point about the power of the arts to attract and retain outstanding talent, my vision would be that Atlanta would be more sticky for those really talented people. I was sharing earlier that I've lived in Atlanta since 2007, and I know personally at least a dozen artists who came here because of the hope and promise and potential of Atlanta, who had to leave because they couldn't make a living here. So if we're going to accomplish all that we've been talking about, then we'll be able to keep that incredible talent here.
All right. Okay. Anyone else?
We are absolutely working on making Duluth in Gwinnett County a destination, and we're doing this by trying to develop a culture of art within our city. A couple of points that I want to make is we are planning for redevelopment, and as we plan for redevelopment, we're keeping art in the forefront of our minds. We are really developing an art infrastructure as we plan for the future. Just like we plan for roads and streets and bridges, we have to plan for art as well. So what we're doing within inside our city limits is we're putting a piece of art in our roundabout. We are widening our sidewalks so we can encourage outdoor entertainment and outdoor dining. We're trying to make downtown Duluth more of a strolling area, a walkable area. You have to create that culture where people will want to come there and enjoy art. So you have to have dining. You have to have lighting. Even the signs in our city limits are creative and beautiful. We had artist on our sign committee to design our signs. So we're really trying to just create a culture of art. And the second point I want to make about this is we're also developing an audio identity. We have been working with Eddie Owen, who is from the Decatur area, and he is helping Duluth bring local talented people to our area. We want to be a talent magnet, and we really feel like music is a great way to do this. If you can support a local music scene in your city, it's just as important as supporting a retail development or an office building. So those are the two key things that we're doing to have a vision for art in Duluth.
Okay, you can't leave us hanging on this. So when artists design a sign for the city, what does the sign look like?
Okay.
How different is it?
They're really beautiful signs. We took in mind how our City Hall looks in the entire downtown, and we used a lot of wrought iron in our signs, and they're very decorative and beautiful, and we have a plan for all the other signs that we're going to add.
So I'm sensing a large part of the audience is going to be in a car going out to look at the signs in Duluth this
We hope
weekend,
so. We want you to come out there and spend your money, be a tourist, and then go back home.
All right.
Yeah.
Dave, do you have any vision?
Yeah, I was recently at the Atlanta Regional Commission. I'm on the Arts and Culture Committee. And I think they've done a great job in reframing this conversation about arts and culture that already exists. As part of their study they recently did, talk about what a big arts community we have here in terms of the number of people employed in arts and cultural community, the number of businesses here. They put together a 3-minute video just kind of brief glimpses of arts and cultures throughout the city. And it's amazing because you've got the big institutions, you've got the small institutions, you've got parkland, you've got botanical gardens, you've got the zoo, you've got all kinds of things here that create the kind of vibrancy we have. What we don't have, if you will, is breaking down the silos. We're still very fragmented, and yet art and culture is an area that can take us across the urban geography. And so what we need to do, I think, as a region is to recognize what great infrastructure we have here and build on it, to your point, rather than think we have to go out and create something new. And I think in 20 years, that gives us enough runway that none of us remember what we said here today, but we could, in fact, have some major events. And one of the things that the ARC and the predecessor in arts and culture, the MAC group, Metropolitan Atlanta Arts and Culture Coalition, talked about was having an Olympics-type philosophy about how bringing and collaborating with institutions here, having special events, that Atlanta can become a destination area, and that then reinforces all that's here as part of the quality of life, the educational aspirations of people, and how arts and culture picks into that, and then really further drives the engine for economic development.
To what I hear you saying, Dave, is that there's already a substantial amount of stuff that's going on here that if we knew more about it, we would begin to connect.
And if you haven't been to Atlanta Planet, then go see what's out there. It's an online service that basically talks about venues and locations and dates and things like that. And again, it's just amazing what's out there right now.